Alright, welcome back. So before I get into actually painting some skin textures for the model, I wanted to designate a section to going over the transition between Mari 1.5, or some of you using 1.6, into Mari 2.0. So I built this little diagram here that kind of illustrates, which many of you probably already know, the way Mari 1.5, 1.6 or earlier works with regards to how we traditionally used to paint as texture painters in Photoshop. As you can see, essentially, shaders are folders and channels are layers. That's the gist of how you can transition from a traditional texture painting workflow into Mari. Quite frankly, this took me a little bit of time to understand and wrap my head around in the very beginning once I got the program, but after that it was kind of smooth sailing and I really could do whatever I wanted in the program. So this is the current paradigm for Mari. But now with the advent of Mari 2.0, which is soon to release, I think it's supposed to be mid-March, we're going to see a new shift. And so let me open up 2.0 and we'll take a look. So here we go. 2.0 doesn't look much different. There are a couple new icons up here and a couple new features. So before I actually dive into anything, I want to preface this kind of section with a couple things. First thing I want to say is that if you guys are working in 2.0, I strongly encourage you not to open up or work on projects that are currently being worked on in 1.5, 1.6 or earlier. Because of the new system, you will be able to open it, but it's not going to be ideal. And I'll get into that a little bit later when you guys really understand how the new system works. So if you are adamant on using 2.0, I would recommend you using it with brand new clean assets. So you can build it up from scratch and then you have to worry about any translation. And you cannot, at this point, you can't take a file from 2.0 in back to 1.5 or 1.6 or earlier. So that's the other kind of pitfall if you do transition older versions of projects into the new system. The second thing I wanted to say is that, as you can see, this is Mari 2.0 V1 A7. So this is an alpha version. And with that comes a couple, hiccups that we're going to see. So just understand that this program, in its current state, has a lot of features that are not yet introduced. It has features that are currently there but not working correctly, and it has yet to include features that will be in the release in mid-March. So kind of bear with me when I'm going through this demo. For the most part, it's pretty stable, and for the way I use Mari, it's been actually a really nice pleasure because of the new system. So let's actually open up the model and take a look. Pretty much the same as before, so we're just going to load a new model. And here we go. So this is Mari 2.0. I'm not going to get into color space. As you can see, I'm switching this off. That's kind of a topic in itself. For the way I use Mari at work, at home, I don't deal with display LUTs. At work, the display and the color correction from working from sRGB to linear, it's a kind of a mess in terms of what to do when. It really depends on what studio you're at and how they've set up their pipelines. But at the current studio I'm at, the way we work is strictly sRGB, and everything that needs to be converted to linear gets converted once we publish maps. So that's basically how it works. So we don't deal with any display LUTs or anything on our end. So we're not going to deal with that here. So before I actually start painting, I want to kind of go through the new setup. And as you can see, lo and behold, there is a Layers tab. And I believe many of us have been waiting for this for a very long time. And it's pretty awesome. As you can see, it's basically Photoshop. You've got your layers, you've got your blend modes, you've got your opacity. It's pretty awesome. This is the paintable icon, so whenever you select so say I select more layers here, if I want to paint on layer this layer here, I have to select this icon in order to paint. So let me just grab a color, like so. And I'll bake that down. So if I'm in this layer, for instance, at this point, because there's only layers, it's going to select it paintable. But if you have adjustment layers built up and groups and stuff, be careful of where you're selecting your icon, because you may get tripped up. Just make sure that whatever you want to paint on is actually selected by this icon here. Pretty simple. And as you can see with this layer here, it's completely separate. I can change the opacity, I can change the blending. So it's pretty much Photoshop in a nutshell, which is really nice. So let's move on to the shaders and the channels. So let's bring up this diagram. So before, like I said, shaders are folders, and that's the way I envisioned them, and that's the way they kind of worked in Mari in the past. Well, now shaders are exactly what they are, they're shaders. So if I were to create one, and you have a couple to choose from, I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but you can kind of go through and see the different functionalities. I'm going to just choose a Beckman, and as you can see, it is simply a place that I can plug in maps in order to see them put together. Very basic. So there are no more shader modules. You don't bake things from shaders. You don't create new shaders in order to build layers of channels. That doesn't exist anymore. So you're only going to be using shaders as shaders at this point in a traditional sense, which is really cool. Same functionality, full shaded, and flat. So the next thing we want to look at are channels. And as you can see, there's this folder icon next to this default channel that was created called color. And that's exactly what it is. So if we go back to Photoshop, before, Mari channels were basically layers that you put into shaders that were basically folders. Well, it shifts now. So shaders that were folders are simply shaders, but now channels are what shaders were in Mari before. So channels are actually folders now, and all they do is house all of your layers. So the channels that used to be layers get shifted to the layers that are currently layers here. So everything shifts over one basically. So you're not going to be building a bunch of channels together in the same sense that you were in before. You do that all now in the Layers tab, which is very cool. So this is a way to keep things organized. Another great feature in here is if I select these layers, I can actually group them, which is amazing. So it creates another extra level of organization, which has been fantastic in my dealings with Mari 2.0 thus far. And being able to create new channels that I can designate as color, displacement, spec, and within each of these channels, or quote-unquote folders, you have your respective layers that you can build up and keep things completely non-destructive. So in this new system, it's really almost forcing you to be non-destructive, which is fantastic. Whereas in the old system of Mari, you had to be very clever on how you created your channels, how you put them into shaders to make things run non-destructively and smoothly, so you can make changes on the fly very quickly. It was kind of a workaround to do it this way. So finally, with the creation of Mari 2.0, that is a thing of the past, and we can now work just like we were doing in Photoshop. So at this point, I think you guys are probably wondering what happened to the shader modules that we once had that were very cool, a lot of cool functionality to them. Where did they go? Well, they're actually now a function of these layers. So if I have this layer here that I painted on, this red layer, and I'm just going to rename that. Now, if I wanted to make an adjustment to this red, let's say we want to change the hue, I can do that a couple different ways. And I'm going to do another example here. I'm going to go to this very base layer and paint blue, like so. I'm going to call that blue. So let's say I want to change the hue of the red and the blue because it's layer based. I'm going to click on this icon here, and it's called Add Adjustment Layer. You can do it here, or you can right click in here and add adjustment layer there. And I'm just going to add a hue saturation levels. This goes on top. I'm just going to drag this underneath. And from here I have what I need. So what I'm doing is I'm adjusting the hue saturation to both of these layers underneath. So it's layer based, just like in Photoshop. So if I were to drag this underneath, it's only going to affect the blue, like so. Very cool. And I can dial this opacity like so. I can change the blend mode, everything that I want to do, just like in Photoshop I can do here. So this is one way to change that. Another way, say I wanted to, let's delete this guy. Say I wanted to do a hue saturation to just the red and not the blue. I can't really do that with the way I just did because it's going to affect both. So in order to do that, just like you would in Photoshop where you would lock a adjustment to a specific layer, you can do that here by right-clicking on the layer and going to Adjustment Stack. And so this is a stack within the layer that has the same functionalities as all these adjustment layers here. However, now this is being appended to the red layer with this icon here. So if I click on this icon, it's going to bring up this stack like so. And as you can see, it's just affecting the red. And within this adjustment stack, which is inside here, so I click that, it's going to open it up here. I'm doing it within the same window of Mari because of the way this is recording, but you can have this off on a different screen. And this adjustment stack is a separate window, separate palette compared to the layers here. So if I were to click here, now within here I have a whole nother slew of ways I can layer things on. So I can do a brightness within this layer and brighten it up, darken it down. I can do a invert on this layer, and it's just being assigned to that layer here. So if I were to shift click this, all those adjustments I've been doing I can hide and unhide, just like Photoshop. So you're getting these nestled stacks within stacks of being able to apply really nice complex layering systems within Mari in a 100% non-destructive method. So this is basically a dream come true for most of us who've been, dealing with Mari. It's, great tool, great, functionality. However, we all have been, praying every night for that day when we can build things up just like in Photoshop. And with 2.0, we can do exactly that. And to add even more complexity, we can actually now add layer masks to each layer. So say I wanted to layer mask this red out, just a part of it. I'm going to click on this red and go to layer mask, add mask. So there's a reveal, hide, and from alpha. If you hit reveal, it's going to create a layer mask for this channel, for this layer, and fill it with white, so it reveals everything that is associated to the layer. If you do hide, it'll fill with black, and it'll hide everything. So at this point, let's do reveal, and it's create a third icon here. And in order to paint into this mask, you have to select the icon for the layer mask instead of the paint. So this is where we have to be very careful and be very aware of where we're clicking regarding what we're painting, because you don't want to be painting into a layer mask where as you really want to be painting in the actual layer itself. So be wary of that when you're painting. I'm going to click that layer mask. I'm going to reset to black and white and grab a brush, and in the layer mask I'm just going to paint it out like so. And as you can see, shift selected, separate layer into this layer mask, which is very cool. I can also do the same thing within this adjustment stack. I can do an invert and apply a layer mask to this invert. Now let's say we want to hide it. So we'll select that mask and we'll paint into that mask for that. So we can really start building up some really amazing complexity within our textures because you have layer masks within adjustment stacks that are within layers themselves. And as you can see, you can start building up a lot of complexity with the textures, with the way you layer things, completely non-destructive, and it's just really awesome. So these are a couple of the functionalities and the way I work in Mari 2.0 in terms of how you deal with layers versus channels and shaders. I'm going to get more into that once we start actually painting the maps, regarding how we work from finishing our color maps into working into our spec maps and our displacement maps and stuff like that. And it's very easy and very functional. So like I said, there's a bunch of other options within here. Back to an original point. As you can see, there are no shader modules. So a lot of you are probably wondering where the tiled shaders, the triplanar projections, a lot of stuff that we rely on now. They are still here. And if you right click and you go to procedural layer, they're all in this list here. So you can see that we have the tiled shader still. We have some more patterns and some other cool functionality. Like so. Now this list is always changing. Before it had the triplanar projection, but it doesn't look like it's in this current alpha. So that's something I'm not sure if they're going to keep in or if they're going to leave out. But the tiled module is still there, which is really handy. A bunch of different kind of patterns and noise functions are pretty cool. So I encourage you guys to mess with these and see what you can get. You can get some really cool results very quickly, like so. So that concludes this kind of demo into the introduction into Mari 2.0. All the other functionality here are basically the same with the paint buffer, your projection tab, everything else is as it was. The real big difference is how we paint using layers and channels and shaders. So once you wrap your head around that, then it's going to be smooth sailing. So in the next section, I'm going to actually start bringing in some the graded reference photography that I did, and we're going to start laying down some initial color maps for her face.